Welcome back to this week's episode of the Campfire Series podcast. I am your host, Logan Soforenko. We have an awesome interview today. It is with CBS Sports and NBA on TNT play-by-play broadcaster Spero Dedes, who was so kind to take some time out of his day to discuss with me the awesomeness of the broadcasting world. Let's get to it.
Once again, I also appreciate you taking some time out of your day and meeting with the guy that just mentioned you in a tweet on Twitter.
What's that? No, of course. I'm happy to do it. I was you, man, not long ago. I was knocking people's doors down. So when you make it big, you're going to do the same thing for the other guys.
Well, I just got to say, I'm a big fan of your work. I've been kind of following your journey. Honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, not as long as I feel like I should have, because I watched the Loyola Chicago series playoff run back in March Madness a couple of years ago, and that's kind of what I remember. But also, you called a couple of Celtics games in the bubble this past season, and I was like, man, this guy's got a cool voice. Who is this guy?
Yeah,
I looked up Spero Dedes, but I really appreciate that. But I want to hear about yourself. I want to hear a little bit about college, because college, you know, me being not just a student of broadcasting, but a student in general. Ironically, my term paper I'm writing, nothing to do with sports broadcasting, but we're using primary sources from your alma mater. So tell me a little bit about your college experience.
Boy, you know, for me, I've said many times, everything for me started at Fordham, and the uniqueness of the broadcast program that they offer there, to me, it's unmatched. You know, I know that there's amazing programs in other parts of the country and other universities. Syracuse, of course, comes to mind, and such a long list of universities that have produced so many of the big people in our industry. But the uniqueness of Fordham for me was a couple of things. One, the list of alumni in the New York sports broadcasting fraternity was like a who's who of my broadcast heroes. So Mike Breen, of course, longtime voice of the NBA, the Knicks, Bob Papa, longtime radio voice of the New York Giants. Michael Kay has been the TV voice of the Yankees for years and years. It's such a long list. Chris Carino with the Nets. And then on the print side, of course, Vince Scully, you know, the godfather, the person who started it all. So for me, that was enticing in and of itself, that we'd have access to these people. You know, they'd come in on Wednesdays. We do a broadcast workshop. Mike Breen would literally come into the room, listen to our tapes, and then give us one-on-one critiques and feedback. You know, that in and of itself was amazing. Secondly, we had press credentials to all of the pro teams in New York. So, you know, I would go to class on a Monday or Tuesday, walk to the subway, take the D train down to Manhattan, go cover the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, go cover a Giants game on a Sunday across the Hudson at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. And all the while, we're basically getting real world experience as on-air radio students, radio broadcasters as students at a 50,000 watt radio station in the middle of New York City. So to me, there's no other school that I know of that could offer that. And, you know, that's where it started for me. I mean, I literally can remember the first day getting to Fordham and running to the radio station and asking who's in charge, because I want to sign an application to be part of this kind of fraternity and family. And that's where it started for me. And it's the best decision I've ever made.
When was it that you realized, was it in high school that you realized, hey, I want to go into sports broadcasting. I have a love for sports, whether it be radio or print, any sort of medium that gets me in front of sports. When did you realize that?
Great question. You know, for me, I was such a weirdo, man. I can remember being in middle school and watching games. I was a diehard Knick fan, Giants, you know, never missed a game. And I just remember at some point stopping paying attention to the actual sport itself and becoming infatuated with the announcers, specifically the play-by-play person. And it started for me on radio because I spent a lot of time in the car, and Mike Breen was probably the first radio broadcaster whose voice I kind of fell in love with. You know, the intimacy of radio. Mike had such a power in his voice, such a resonance. I loved his style. You know, when the Knicks were not playing well, he would not be an apologist for the team. He told it like it was. That attracted me to his style. And then it just kind of started from there. Of course, Marv Albert was a hero of mine. And I could remember playing Nintendo, playing video games and calling the game as I was playing, just out of nowhere. You know, it just kind of started to happen. I can remember playing pickup basketball in our driveway with my buddies. And as we were playing, I would just start calling the game. And of course, initially they all looked at me like I was crazy. Then it became kind of a comedic routine. They all would be keeled over laughing as I kind of made fun of everyone as we played. And at some point, I realized that this is something I could do for a living. I told my father it was something I wanted to pursue. He thought I was crazy, told me, over my dead body, I'm not going to send you to college and pay all this money for a broadcast degree, and then you're just going to end up right back in the family business, which was a diner and a restaurant in central New Jersey. So that took some convincing, but long story short, he's now become my biggest fan, and it's just been awesome to share this journey with my family and close friends.
That's pretty awesome. You mentioned it about Mike Breen. I think the best announcers, if their team isn't doing too well, they tell it how it is. And I'm a Red Sox fan, but I love Michael Kay because he tells the Yankee fans what's going on and what's wrong. But I think it's a big thing to get your family on board. And I told my parents, during quarantine, I think I kind of realized that I kind of want to get all in on this because I do theater. That's weird. I did theater in high school, but while doing broadcasting, and I just fell in love with it. And they were like, perfect. And we have a family diner, air quote, if you will, as well. It's a cupcake store. But nevertheless, your voice in college, I would assume it was a little bit different than it was now. How do you, like myself right now, I don't know the ways of having an overhead mic and training my voice for it. I podcast, so every now and then I just play around with it. But how did you train your voice in college when you got to radio and play-by-play?
First of all, let me just say that listening to you in the short time we've been talking here, your voice is like Vince Scully compared to what I sounded like when I was in college and pre-college. I'm not kidding. If you wanted to torture me, find a loop of a broadcast that I did at Fordham, play it on an endless loop and lock me in a room. That would be like the worst case of torture you could ever subject me to. It really took me a long time to get comfortable with my own sound. And, if you listen to, I'm not kidding, if you listen to a tape of mine from Fordham, it would almost sound like a Saturday Night Live skit, like a parody of someone trying to make fun of what a sports announcer sounds like. I was so self-conscious of my voice. I thought I sounded too young. I just didn't think like I belonged, like I sounded like what I needed to sound like. So I overcompensated, and the pitch of my voice was like up here when it should have been here. And I'm so impressed with so many of these young guys who've come out, Adam Amin, Joe Davis, God, the list is so long. Ryan Rucco, another Fordham guy, of how mature their voices sound at such a young age, like at the age of 30, 31, 32. When I was just getting to those years, I didn't sound like that. And it really took me a long time to get comfortable with my own sound. And that's something that I think everyone kind of has a different path to that. For me, it was reps, it was getting comfortable. And, in some ways it's like feeling comfortable in your own kind of broadcast skin. For me, it took a little longer than normal. Thankfully, I was getting jobs and people were hiring me despite what I sounded like, which I think was absolutely horrific. But I guess everyone has their own unique journey, and this is kind of where mine has taken me to the last couple of years.
And you got a pretty big gig, before 30. Tell us a little bit about that.
I feel like I've lived a charmed life. I had so many incredible opportunities, whether it was WFAN radio in New York, which, anyone in this business knows is kind of the gold standard of sports talk radio and sports broadcasting. They hired me a couple of months out of Fordham to do some backup shifts as their 2020 update anchor, which to me was like the biggest gig ever. Having listened to the station and listened to the update anchors over the years, I knew everything about them. I knew all of them, and now I was one of them. That led to a gig doing arena football. NBA TV hired me. Eventually, Yes Network hired me in New York, the Yankees regional sports network, to do Ivy League football and basketball. That I thought was like, my God, this is like the pinnacle of my career. And it was such a big moment for me. John Filippelli, who still runs the network, gave me such an incredible opportunity. And then that led eventually to me landing the radio job with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2005. At 25 or 26, I can't remember, but that's when kind of my life really changed, and moved across the country and that was really the first big moment as kind of the frontline voice of a network or a team.
That's pretty awesome. Well, congratulations on that. I know that was, a while ago now, because you're, on CBS and NBA on TNT and, the stages now. But I want to ask how you got involved with CBS. You've been with CBS for a while. You've been with Adam Archuleta for, a couple of years now.
4 years, yeah.
How did you get involved with CBS football?
Like almost all of these gigs, you have an agent, and your agent makes calls on your behalf. And we were banging on CBS's door for a long time, just saying, look, if there's ever an opportunity, obviously I would jump at it. And, eventually it's conversations. It's all right. We'll call you if we have something for you. And they ended up giving me a couple of games before 2010, before they brought me in as, one of their main backups. And that went relatively well. And then a year or two later, hey, we've got another game. This announcer isn't available. Is Spero available to do this game in Cincinnati or wherever it was? And that got to a point in 2010 where they hired me to do the NCAA tournament. And that's been an annual occurrence since then, which is crazy to think that I've done 9 or 10 NCAA tournaments since 2010. And now, I'm one of their regular NFL announcers, and March Madness and college basketball during the regular season. So I'm just living the dream. Honestly, I pinch myself every day I wake up and realize that I get to do this for a living.
And with that, because it's such an awesome gig, a lot of people want to do it. Tell me how competitive it really is. Like, tell me how, bring it on me. Like, don't cushion it.
Don't sugarcoat.
Exactly.
I've said for many years, this is the most cutthroat business that I've ever experienced, certainly in my life, but also have observed, because like you said, there are so many talented people. There are 1,000 guys behind me, or gals, who can do this job, if not as good, but better than me. So I think that's always been a driving force. Now with the advent of social media, we're held to such a high standard, as we should. You make one mistake during an NFL game on a Sunday, I've got 100 tweets telling me I'm the worst broadcaster of all time. So there's so many eyes now. The focus is so laser sharp on what we're saying, what we're doing. And if you don't perform, someone is going to come try to take your job, if you don't get shown the exits by your bosses at whatever network or team you're with. So the pressure was always there to perform. Now I just feel like it's been heightened even more. And unfortunately now with COVID, there are a lot of really talented people who have lost their jobs. So the workforce has really swelled. So if you're not performing, again, I mean, there's a number of talented people who are out there waiting for their chance. And so that, if that's not motivation enough for someone like me, who has one of these just, really incredible jobs, then, you probably need to get out of this business and go do something else.
Well, that being said, you mentioned you had an agent when you got involved early on. How might one go about in getting an agent?
For me, I was very fortunate. My first agent, a man by the name of John Cirillo, was actually one of my professors at Fordham. Taught a sports communications class on the side. His main profession, and still is owning a public relations company in New York City. So as you can imagine, John had this incredible Rolodex, a network of connections in sports, in media, entertainment, that was just incredible. So I built a relationship with John off to the side. He heard some of my stuff at Fordham, and he pulled me aside one day and he said, look, I think you really have a chance to do something in this business, and I feel like I can help you. So I said, my God, this is even before I even thought of having an agent. I was so young at that point. I think it was only my freshman year at college. And so John started making calls on my behalf. And that was just amazing. First of all, I'm getting all of these incredible experiences as a college student broadcaster. And now I've got someone actually acting as my manager agent. And that actually led to me getting my first gig while I was still in school with the their first go around as the sideline reporter for the New York, New Jersey Hitmen, which just kind of fell in my lap. And that was the first step. And I say all the time, John Cirillo did all the heavy lifting in my career, got me the Lakers gig, got me Yes Network and NBA TV. I owe him a huge debt of gratitude for what he did for me. But I would say to young broadcasters, to answer your question, you go about finding an agent the same way you try to hunt down a job. Online, making phone calls. I would say, if you're a young guy, a young broadcaster, you want to target maybe a younger agent, someone who is equally as hungry as you are to make their stamp in their industry, because the more established agents are obviously working with the top guys, the veteran broadcasters, guys who've been in the business for a number of years. And so maybe you'd kind of slip through the cracks with them, because all of these agents have multiple broadcast clients. And sometimes you wonder, well, are they devoting enough time to me? So what I tell young broadcasters is, if you are trying to find an agent, try to find someone young, someone who's as hungry as you are.
When it comes to live video play-by-play and radio play-by-play, is there a difference? And are there different tactics that you have to have for doing each one? Because technically, I don't know this when it comes to radio and live play-by-play. Is there a difference if one is doing each? Like, I know Kevin Harlan, he calls Sunday games on CBS, and then also he calls them on radio for the Chargers or for the Rams on Monday night. This was just this past week.
Sure.
So is there a big difference?
I think, first of all, Kevin Harlan is one of the all-time favorites of mine, and it's just unbelievable what he's able to do. His schedule, everything he does is just amazing. I would say at its core, it's the same on some levels in terms of excitement, description, and those things. But calling a game on radio versus TV, two very different things in a lot of different ways. I think for the most part, for most of the great play-by-play men, radio is always the foundation. Most of them have started in radio, and that, I just think, gives a play-by-play person the foundation that's needed for one very simple fact. When you're calling a game on the radio, the person listening is completely blind. They're completely dependent on you for everything, for descriptions, scoring time, everything that you can see visually in the stadium, they can't see, whether they're in their car or home or wherever they might be. And when you have a great game on radio, when you've come with the descriptions and filled in all of the things that the viewer can't see, there's nothing more satisfying than doing that on radio, because of what I just said. TV, you're almost like a second traffic cop. They can see it. It's a visual medium, and you're filling in the blanks. You're setting up your analyst, initiating conversation with him or her, and then punctuating the big moments, the big slam dunk, the big home run, the big touchdown play, the game-winning shot at the end of a game. And that's not easy. There's an art form to that as well, but they are different in a lot of ways. I would encourage any young broadcaster who wants to do play-by-play, start in radio, really build your chops, hone your skills there. And then TV is a natural progression that you can kind of take that next step towards once you've gotten comfortable on the radio side.
I definitely noticed that when you listen to the radio broadcasters, like sometimes when you watch highlights back of like baseball, for instance, they'll have, Joe Buck calling the World Series on TV, but sometimes in the highlights, they'll throw the local radio play-by-play person over that. And you hear it's a lot more specific and way more detailed because, the audience member is blind. So I think that's great insight, and I appreciate that. Yeah. But here's a little fandom now that I got you here. You have a lot of favorite calls, I would assume, over your many years of broadcasting. But in these past couple of months, you called the bubble. You've called games just in this new weird 2020 NFL season, which we're so thankful for. And likewise with a couple of years before that. What's a game that really sticks out to you in recent years that you've called that's just, hey, it's a favorite?
God, there's so many. I would say from the bubble, I would say the first game of the Miami second round series, when they won to knock off Milwaukee and really kind of set the tone of that series. A couple of huge threes in the second half down the stretch. And for me, I always love calling a game where the underdog is making a big play to knock down Goliath, at the end of a game. That's always kind of a jolt of energy that I've had. It was a little different doing it in the bubble, because if that game had been played in Milwaukee, there's nothing quite like road team, underdog team hitting a big shot, silencing a crowd. That's always something, a moment that I kind of live for as a broadcaster. That comes to mind. All-time favorite calls, I would have to say first and foremost would be the first championship with the Lakers. When I was doing the Laker games on the radio, the basketball immortality call in 2009 when they beat the Magic in Orlando, just a flood of memories comes back, knowing those guys and traveling with the team for years and years at that point, 5 or 6 years. And then being able to experience that first championship celebration was just pretty awesome. So, man, so many great memories. I feel like I've lived, 10, 20 broadcast lives at this point with all the great games that I've had a chance to call.
The one that for some reason my young sister, she's 11 years old. She follows the sports that I watch. And every time we watch a commercial, when we were watching the bubble, we always would hear the mesmerizing talents of Jamal Murray. I was like, that's Spero. I want to talk to him one day. But with that being said, you had a pretty crazy time heading to the bubble. The traveling part of broadcasting is, I would assume, very fun, but obviously when you're settled down, you have a family, it can get a little crazy. But I spoke to a public address announcer the other day that said going there was fine. Coming back was the scary part, because people in the airport, they weren't tested. We were in a bubble away from the world. So I want to hear a little bit about your experience with the bubble, traveling there, getting settled down, and obviously leaving, coming back home.
Yeah, I will say, first of all, I was blown away by what the league did, what they were able to put together in a short amount of time to get the bubble set up and to get the arenas retrofitted, to get the hotels ready for all of us, was just wild. We had watched the games. I had heard the stories and some of the reports from a lot of my colleagues who were in Orlando before I got there, and everyone was just blown away by what the league was able to do. You couldn't have felt safer. The minute you walked into the hotel, there were temperature checks and people there to make sure everyone was wearing their masks and doing what they were supposed to be doing. We got tested twice a week, every Tuesday, every Friday. We had to go down to an area of the hotel, get tested. Within 24 hours, we had the results, and everyone's got their credential. Everyone's got their armbands. And so you just knew you were in this protected environment. So I agree. Getting there and flying back was really the only time where maybe you could have been a little concerned. But I have to say, I've just tried to, not overthink things. We're all living through unprecedented times. This is a pandemic that's affected people all over the world, and it's scary, and people have lost loved ones and close friends. And I just think, or at least what I've tried to do, is just not let the moment kind of run your day-to-day life. We all risk our health and lives every day we step outside of our homes, and hopefully we'll all be able to get through this and things will get back to some level of normalcy here soon.
Amen to that. But that's really inspiring. And with that being said, walk me through. You're back. You're calling games on Sundays. You just had a really fun game, the Browns and Bengals. I watched the entire game, and I don't normally watch Browns Bengals games. Come on, that's just not me. But what does a prep week look like? As my dogs are kind of going off.
That's all right.
What does a prep week look like in the 5 days you have off?
For us, it starts. I tell people all the time, it's like cramming for a midterm every week in college. The level of research and the level of prep really starts the Sunday night when you finish the previous game. So we do Cleveland and Cincinnati on Sunday. Luckily for us, we've got the Bengals again this week. So this is kind of an atypical week, but assuming it was another set of teams, I would get on the plane. I would have already downloaded their games from that day, and I'm starting to watch their previous games. So this week we've got Tennessee, Cincinnati. I immediately sit down, start watching the Titans-Pittsburgh game from Sunday to get myself caught up to date with the Tennessee Titans. That's step one. Step two is to go through their game notes, to go through their newspaper clippings from the last couple of weeks. What's been happening with the team? Luckily, I've found someone by the name of Matt Park, who is the longtime radio voice of the Syracuse Orange football and basketball teams. And Matt has devised this incredible Microsoft Excel spreadsheet spotting board software. So he makes my spotting boards. So by Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday, the latest, he'll send me my boards, which is basically a big chart with a player box, name, all their biographicals, where they've gone to school, stats, and then I'll start to fill in my notes for each individual player, team, offense, defense. And as the week goes on, Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, I'm kind of building to getting ready for the game. And again, media clips, an endless ream of research notes that we get on these teams and players. And the research gathering really never stops until you get to the stadium on Sunday morning and get ready to call the game.
When it comes to having a color commentator, you and Adam, great duo. But I find myself when I watch not only just football games, but any sporting event, a play-by-play announcer's job is so much harder without having someone next to you kind of breaking it down. So tell me how important having not only just a good color commentator is, but just having one in general, whether it be, play-by-play, you have one next to you on the broadcast, or if you're doing PA announcing, having a spotter with you as well. And you probably have a spotter for play-by-play as well. Sure. But how important are these people when it comes to putting on this show?
Oh my God. I've never called a game without an analyst. And I hear some of these guys who still do it to this day. I know the LA Clippers have not employed an analyst on the radio for I think ever. I don't think they've ever done that. Brian Seaman, who's now their TV voice, did radio for the Clippers for years as a solo act. He blew me away with how talented he was in doing that. Now Noah Eagle, who his Ian son is off and running and doing such an incredible job. I don't think I could ever do that. To me, that's very, very challenging to have to carry a broadcast, just the sheer vocal fatigue that you can have, because especially someone like me, I really kind of push my vocals during the course of the game. So just having the analyst talk and give me a break every couple of seconds is huge for me. Secondly, when you have the chemistry with someone, and luckily now I've been with Adam for 4 years, it just makes such a difference. There's a level of trust. I know that wherever I take him during the course of a broadcast, Arch is going to respond with some really nuanced analysis. The other thing is we can kind of rib each other because we do have that trust. I can poke fun at him. He can poke fun back. And it just makes for a more relaxed, casual broadcast. Our goal every week is to just sound like we're two guys at a bar, the proverbial two guys in the bar watching the game and having the audience kind of eavesdrop in on our conversation. Arch, to me, is one of the most unique analysts in the NFL in that he's not an ex-quarterback. He's not an ex-coach. He's not an ex-offensive player. He was a defensive guy. And so he sees the game from the flip side, breaking down quarterbacks, breaking down how defenses approach offenses. And he's just always coming with a different angle. And I find him to be a fascinating listen. I'm definitely biased after being with him for 4 years and becoming one of his close friends. And we just have a blast. To me, when you're traveling and spending so much time on the road with your analyst, and when you really genuinely hit it off, there's nothing better. So it's been a nice run for 4 years with Arch.
You mentioned how you sometimes push your vocal cords on the mic because you get excited sometimes, especially this past week. Obviously, you called some buzzer beaters, all that stuff.
Sure.
How do you kind of? We mentioned it before about training your voice, but how do you get excited without screaming into the mic and blowing everyone's ears off on the TV? And you get the big emphasis on the mic. How do you kind of train your voice to go up in that register without actually screaming?
Lots of trial and error, lots of reps. I can remember listening to my tapes early on and knowing, man, this is not how it should sound. And I can always remember one of our mentors at Fordham, one of the legends in the business, someone by the name of Marty Glickman, who I hope some of the younger generations know. Marty, if you look him up, was basically Marv Albert before Marv Albert in New York, covered all the sports, all the big teams in New York, national games. And Marty, in the last years of his life, was one of our broadcast mentors at Fordham. So he would come in, same with the other guys, listen to our stuff and critique us. And Marty always said, always give yourself room to go up in the fourth quarter, meaning big dunk, big shot early in the game. Don't go, crazy, because if that happens again in the fourth with the game on the line, you've got to take it up a notch from there. And that always stuck with me. And the more comfortable I got, the more you self-evaluate what you sound like. you just kind of feel it, right? I mean, it's a feel thing. It's a comfort thing. And I always tell broadcast students, you have to listen to your stuff. Even to this day, I finish a game during the week. At some point, I'm going to go back and listen, make a little checklist of what I liked, what I didn't like, things I want to improve on. And that's one of them, right? I mean, to me, the most important part of a game is in a close game at the end when everything's on the line and player X hits a big shot, hits a big three, or, scores a touchdown for the team to win a game. That's when you want to really command the moment and know proper pitch, proper energy level of where you need to be. And again, it's a style thing as well. Gus Johnson's calling card is that unbridled energy and enthusiasm that he has in the big moments. Kevin Harlan, the same. Other guys are a little bit more understated. I feel like I'm kind of closer to that side, but that's a whole other conversation. You have to really be true to who you are and what your style is and what you're comfortable doing as a broadcaster. And to get there, it's reps and it's practice and all of those things.
I feel like you hit it right on the head. Every time we watch and study broadcasters, we're like, we want to be like them. We want to sound like them, but that's not the case. Every time I find myself practicing, every time I sit and watch a football game, I try and veer away. And I'm going to be honest, you're the first voice that kind of naturally comes to me when it comes to football currently, because I can kind of relate to it, but please know I will never plagiarize your craft ever. But
no, feel free. I'd be honored.
But with that being said, right now, these are unprecedented times. We're not looking for work right now. It's hard to get work. And also I'm studying as well. But when it comes to tips on making a resume and a tape, what are some things you can give us? Obviously, do we need to get a LinkedIn profile? Anything like that?
In terms of broadcast reels, it's changed so much now since I was where you are going to be in the next couple of years and trying to join the workforce. The one thing I would say is always be mindful of the person listening, right? The potential employer is probably going to have a stack of tapes. So what I tell broadcast students coming into the workforce is keep it short. 10 minutes to me is probably the cutoff point. Always put your best stuff at the beginning of the reel. So what I always did was, whether it was hoops, whether it was football, I would put 3 or 4 highlight clips in the front, 10 to 30 second clips. Then from there, I would take 2 longer segments of play-by-play, and I would have listened to all of my stuff, and I would pick the very best segments of play-by-play that I can find. Because look, I'm assuming that the person listening has never heard me before, and this is now representing who I am as a broadcaster for this particular job that I'm applying for. So best stuff in the front, 10 minutes total of content, couple of 2 or 3 highlight clips in the front, and then maybe 2 segments of play-by-play, maybe a couple of highlights at the end, depending on what you want to do. But resume, same, one piece of paper, keep it brief, and just try to describe yourself as best you can. I think the resume is secondary, to be perfectly honest with you. These potential employers in broadcasting want to know what you sound like, and can this person handle this job if given the opportunity.
Well, Spero, I really appreciate you giving me all this advice and also sharing stories, and again, taking some time out of your day to meet with me. But before we wrap up, any advice that you haven't said that you want to go ahead and lay on me? Because studying the game, you mentioned Brian Seaman. I get to meet with him next week. I've been fortunate enough to actually meet with these people.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your time again before we wrap up.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk with you. It's always good to talk with young, hungry broadcast students. It's a trip because I was in your seat not too long ago. So it's just good to see that kind of hunger and drive from someone trying to crack into the business. In terms of advice, there's no blueprint for this. It's such a crazy business. It's such a free for all of these just tremendous jobs. I will say that the industry has changed. There's so many more opportunities out there, podcasts and ways that someone in college, even before college, can get their voice out there and get the exposure that you're looking for. Social media, Twitter, there's so many different platforms. I tell broadcast students all the time, try to focus on what your passion is, what you really want to do, and really try to hone your skills in that particular thing. It's great to be versatile. It's great to be able to write. I encourage students all the time to write. try to build up your writing skills. That's something that's very important because as a broadcaster, writing skills are another foundational element to doing this. Having a really good vocabulary, a plethora of kind of a word bank that you can go to as a broadcaster, that's based in writing skills. And just telling yourself that this is going to be a process. You really have to commit to this, honing your craft, getting better at what you want to do, and learn how to deal with rejection. It's something that all of us have to deal with. I applied to a couple of hundred jobs out of Fordham, and I think I heard from one place back. And that's something that's easier said than done, right? I mean, you're an eager college graduate looking for a job, and you think that the first letter you send out is going to be sent back with a yes, we'd like to hire you, but it's just not how the world works. And so I think if you can condition your mind to know that this is going to be a process and that you're in it for the long haul, there's a job out there for you somewhere.
Great way to wrap it up. Spero, I can't say it enough how much I appreciate you taking some time out of your day, quite frankly, and best of luck out in Cincinnati this weekend, going right back to where you were last week.
Thanks, Logan. Pleasure. And I look forward to seeing where you end up, buddy. I know you're way ahead of the curve. You're way ahead of where I was at your age. So again, just really cool to see. And I wish you all the best.
I really appreciate it. Likewise, who knows? You could be calling Super Bowls on CBS when Jim Nantz steps down.
From your lips to God's ears. Thanks, Logan.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
Thanks.